Walk through the public engagement process and the concepts with you.
All right. Well, because Northglenn hasn't had a new park space in over 20 years, we wanted to make sure that we had a really robust public outreach process, and we wanted to reach out to as many people, user groups as we could. So we did do a lot of meetings. We first started off with on our annual parks tour. We took our Parks and Recreation Advisory Board to the space and discussed a little bit about that project. The consultant came, we set up a booth for them at the Food Truck Carnival where they spoke to over 100 people and got a lot of good feedback during that event. The next meeting we had was we actually met with 8th grade students from the Global Village Academy. We had them give us a little presentation, talk about what they'd like to see out there, and then we did a little workshop with our consultants and just discussed some of their ideas with them over that hour. The following meeting was, we had an on-site open house. We saw about 15 to 20 people out there in that space, mostly people from the surrounding adjacent neighborhood. From that group, we had 4 people come in and they were invited to do a little technical working group with our consultants. So we met for about an hour and a half and discussed some more refined ideas for the park space. And then last week, we presented to the Parks Board the same concepts that you're looking at today. Tomorrow we'll be meeting with the Youth Commission to discuss some of their ideas for the space as well. And then in addition, I did meet with the police department, members from the police department, and with our parks maintenance staff to make sure we were touching on some of their concerns that they would have for this space. One thing I'll say is we didn't have an idea for the park before going into this. We did want to make sure that we ask our residents to be careful with their water use, and so we did want to make this a more water conserving park, not a lot of bluegrass. Additionally, we didn't have any plans for a parking lot. This park is intended to be a neighborhood park and not a destination park, and so by leaving the parking lot out of this, it eliminates people driving their cars to this park space. It's kind of a difficult piece of land to get to, and so it really is supposed to be serving the people within about half-a-mile radius. So the first, we have concepts A, B, and C. This was the initial phase. This is what the consultants brought to Parks Board, to the Food Truck Carnival, getting feedback from people from these 3 distinct concepts. And then the fourth one I'll go over with you is kind of a combination of those. It's kind of where we are right now. So I'm going to start with concept A. This one has a lot more looped trails. It has the custom shade structure on the highest point of the site. It has a little seating area for the PD. It's intended to be used by them. It is right next to their new building. There's the winding trails that are all ADA compliant, but there's also stairs that go down the site. So people can use it for different circuits for exercising, walking. And then having some seating along the way as well. There is an existing detention pond down there, and we were intending on perhaps reshaping it and adding seating, adding educational signage. As you can tell in here, there's very, very little bluegrass, so there would be mostly native grasses and drought-tolerant plants. This will help with maintenance. There won't be quite as much maintenance as you would see in normal parks with a lot of bluegrass and not nearly as much water. Is there any questions on the concept A?
How many, for the secondary shade shelter, the one that's right by the Justice Center, how many seats or tables would be there?
That is, we don't really know yet. It's very high level at this point, so it can be grown or contracted depending on
All right, because what I imagine, and I guess you could tell me from the feedback you got from the police specifically, is they probably would like to have a place where they could throw an event of some sort, or so just wanted to make sure it's big enough for.
So this space, as it's identified, definitely is not In this concept is not
Okay.
large enough for an event of any sort.
Okay.
That pavilion would be more like seating for a small group conversation.
Oh, okay.
So more bench seating that's got some shade over the top of
Okay,
it.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I'm looking at actually all of the designs and noticing that all of them include the water detention pond. And I'm curious if there's some sort of elevation levels for the pond and how we intend to keep people out of it, and if we're going to be stocking it at all.
So this pond, and Greg, I might call you up to respond to this a little bit. It is an existing space because of the elevation of the property. That current drainage would continue into that drainage, or into that detention pond. It's very small, so I don't anticipate that we would ever consider stocking it. But do you have any depths at this level of design, Greg?
I don't have the depth, but it does have a existing drainage outlet. So basically what happens is in a large rain event, it's storing excess water that can't be pushed through the storm system. And then once the rest of the water has a chance to make its way through the storm system, then this pond will let out. So it would be only a very short amount of time that you would have standing water.
Okay. Is there any plans, like, in terms of keeping anybody out of it, or is it just going to be a feature of the park?
It would likely just be a feature of the park. And again, if you think about, I'm trying to think of some of the spaces where we have those detention areas where it's not like Croak where it holds it and it stays and it maintains that level. So like Fox Run in Central Park, there's a large grassy detainment pond, and it almost never has water in it.
Okay.
This would be similar but not grassy. So as it rains, it fills up, holds it, and then slowly releases it.
Are we thinking concrete or rocks or just
We haven't gotten to design yet, but I would assume more natural materials based on the rest of the design of the space.
Okay, great. Thank
I
you.
guess this would probably be dry 98 to 99% of the time in Colorado.
Yeah, I don't know the exact percentage, but it would
Just-
be
yeah,
almost
just
all the
for-
time. Yeah.
High rain events.
Can I kind of piggyback on that though, because you mentioned the Fox Run space? That's a weird space. So it's not attractive. It never has water in it. Kids ride their bikes and it's muddy and the kids roll down the hill and it's just a mess. So let's not do that.
We're not.
Okay.
It was designed before Dana or I were.
Yeah, let's not do that. Let's do something different than that. Okay.
It is most likely a requirement though on the space for drainage.
I think it's
yeah.
in that case, I think it's how the builder fit in the right amount of space for
It's just
detention.
weird. Yeah, it's just messy over there.
Yep. All right.
The last thing I'll add on concept A that I didn't touch on was there is a playground space that's close to where you see that butterfly shade structure. There is playground space there.
One on this side, and one over on that side.
All right, I'll move on to concept B. Concept B is more of a less loopy trails, but still has a trail system. That bluegrass area where we're showing a shade structure in the playgrounds, that is it's a flat space, and then it would tear down towards the community center drive. This one is a lot more simple, I think, than the other one. We heard that a lot of people liked concept A better just based on the loopy trails. Do you have any questions on this concept?
Okay, help me understand again. You just said this, the terraced walls, they're going down instead of, and are they like culminating
So
into
the
like
other
an
one is more
amphitheater?
gradual. This one, if you look at it, so see this circle right here on the top, on right here? So that just kind of flattens out that top tier.
Right.
And then the rest of this, so there's some little terrace walls that step down across the site.
Okay, got it.
Okay. And then finally, concept C has a little bit different elements in here. We initially had heard that if you don't give teenagers something to do, they will get into trouble. And so we talked to the public about putting a small skate spot. This wouldn't be a skate park. There's no bowls. Everything's at grade. There's just plans for ramps, rails, things of that nature. Initially, we had put it on the south side of the site, but after some thought about the noise and also just the visibility, we talked to the consultant about moving it down closer to Community Center Drive. You'd have eyes from both of the top of the hill, and you'd have eyes from Community Center Drive that could see that space. Also, there would be less noise impacts on the neighbors if there were kids skating there.
Can you say one more time where it would move?
It would move down to, you see that little call-out box right here? It would move down to where that shade structure is. Closer.
I have my mouse on it up here on the screen.
Thanks.
In this one, we had two shade structures, one at the top of the park space and then one at the bottom with the playgrounds at the bottom of the site as well. And then the final one I'm going to talk about, that is where we are now. In talking to the public and hearing all of their feedback, it was kind of a mixture of all three of these is what the public said they liked. They liked the skate spot closer to the street. They liked having two shade structures in there. You have a playground at the top of the site that's more post and platform traditional playground equipment. And then closer down towards Community Center Drive, you'd have more natural elements, movable elements as well. And then
Can I back you up just a little bit? We have talked a little bit even since this one, that this one might be a little too close to the street, so maybe pulling that back further as well, back to here.
And on this one, they also expanded upon the little Northglenn Police Department Memorial Plaza is what they're calling it out as. They'd have some exercise equipment going around there, some shaded seating, and some trails that they can use as well. Do we have any questions on this draft final?
Jordan?
Thank you. So you mentioned pulling this small skate spot back a little bit, meaning inches or feet back, or?
So if you look where my mouse is, so this is the skate spot on this side of the sidewalk. We weren't as worried about that being closer to Community Center Drive. If you come down here just a little bit, this spot right here is a nature play area. So more likely to be younger children that are playing in that space. So that's the one I would like to see refined further and pulled back. So somewhere along that curve instead of down by the roadway.
Okay, but the skate spot will remain the same.
Skate spot as it's proposed sits right up on the roadway.
Okay.
And I would say the skate spot is probably the one thing we've heard the most different. People are really enthusiastic about it or not enthusiastic about it. So it's definitely something we want feedback on. Yes, Meredith?
So, a couple things. The no parking. So when I think about myself, that means I'm most likely not going to use this park because I don't live anywhere near it. So it's accessible to that neighborhood right below.
Correct. So there's a couple things around there. One, and let me back up just a little bit in that there's not an active playground within walking distance for this immediate neighborhood.
Okay.
There's not an elementary school in that neighborhood. The two parks that are nearby are Winburn and Centennial, which are both very passive use spaces.
Okay.
So unlike most of our other neighborhoods that already have a park they can walk to, this one doesn't. So it helps fit that need.
Okay.
It's not that you couldn't come to it. What we tried to do was avoid identifying it as a destination park because E.B. Rains is very close by. That gives that space for large family gatherings with restrooms with more amenities compared to this space which is identified more for people to walk into. That being said, with the Justice Center nearby, there's easy connectivity there to park in that space and walk over to the park. And then less so along 112th. There's parking available. We don't necessarily want to encourage that, again, because you'd have to weave your way through the neighborhood.
Right.
And we don't want to disrupt those residents through there if we're talking about a destination space.
Well, and I'm nervous about the location because Community Center Drive is going to get so much more traffic with the Justice Center there. So making it too crazy, I mean, the whole concept is beautiful. The location makes me super nervous. So that's the first thing. And so pulling a ton back, I think, makes a lot of sense just because there's going to be so much traffic over there. Another thing, Global Village Academy will most likely use the space. I could imagine taking classes over there or, you know, picnics or whatever, which would be lovely. However, the other side of it is they may use that space a lot. And so I don't know, I know you said you talked to some 8th graders over there. I'm guessing I'm going to be totally just open right here. You talked to the good kids, most likely. You probably.
It was actually a whole class,
There's
correct?
two 8th grade classes.
Because there's a group of kids that are going to use that skate park for other things.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm worried about. Now, will they be stupid enough to do it right by the Justice Center? Yes, they will. They just will. And will the community know they're doing it? Maybe not. But that's that type of space. I think there's a beautiful one in Wheat Ridge that looks really similar. And the community thinks, oh, it's a beautiful destination. It's a beautiful space. But as someone working on the other side of that, it's where they go when they ditch, they smoke pot, they do drugs, they deal all sorts of things. So there's a darker side to that makes me super nervous. So I don't know. I think it's
some of that
beautiful
can
by
exist
design.
no matter how the space is designed. It can exist if it's an open space that people isn't as well visited, and kids can find that as a great place to be. It can be a great space if it's designed for them to be there and providing an amenity for them to be there. So I can see both sides of that.
Yeah, well, me too, but I just worry. So I don't know.
So my biggest issue with this plan is that there is no parking. I think that as you look across 112th Avenue, people are going to park there regardless. Yeah. Especially if there's a playground. Being a mom of young children, I seek out and I will find every playground that is close to me. And I will find it and I will park there. And I do worry because people won't park at the Justice Center because that would be a long walk from the Justice Center all the way down to the playground. So I do worry about the impact of parking along 112th because that's where people are going to park. And I don't really think that, you know, the neighborhood would appreciate something like that. So I would like to see some type of parking, even if it's like a minimal amount, incorporated into the space just to aid that discomfort. Another issue that I'd like to bring up is that there are no restrooms, and I'm assuming you guys were going to do like porta potties or something like that.
Traditionally, at our neighborhood parks, we have not provided restrooms. We have provided portalettes if it's a programmed space. So if there's some sort of group activities happening there for even a short term, we'll add portalettes. Generally, we haven't left portalettes there throughout the summer on neighborhood park spaces.
Okay. Because then, one thing I just heard in general, especially from seniors who like to walk, is they would like to see more restrooms throughout the community because they're not able to walk as far when they don't know that there's going to be a bathroom.
Right.
So I think that's an issue. Plus, dealing with children who have to pee on demand. I mean, that's an issue as well. Or else you're going to have little kids peeing in bushes.
So portalettes are not. We can put portalettes in that space. I think that's a question we have to ask on as we're looking at this space. Are we developing a neighborhood park or are we developing more of a destination space? And I think the types of amenities we have in there really dictate which of those spaces it is.
Yeah, because there's a sewer tap on the property because there used to be a house there. So I feel like that would be at least the first step.
Restrooms would add both restrooms and parking would add a pretty significant price tag.
Okay.
And I think change the use of the space. The only spaces we currently have plumbed restrooms, well, the only space we currently have plumbed restrooms is E.B. Rains. And then soon to be Northwest Open Space, and those are really big regional destination spaces. So it would be although not unheard of, we certainly could do it if that's the direction that you give us. It would be unusual in our community, and I think in most of those around us, to put a plumbed restroom there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. So as I'm looking at this, I'm glad that you guys identified that the playground and the skate park should be moved in more, because that was one of my initial concerns. But the second one is having a really small playground for small children right next to a potential detention pond, and not being able to necessarily control when that does and does not have water, and when it doesn't have any sort of barrier next to it. That gives me a little bit of pause. Second thing is, I think that this is ultimately going to be somewhat of a destination park when it's right across the street from a school and it's right next to the Justice Center. And so I think it's important that we acknowledge that and try to plan accordingly. Like, I think it just is by nature of where it is. And I think also by nature of the fact that there's never been a park over there, and I think that there's going to be a lot of excitement, and we're going to see a lot more traffic. And so I think we need to be cognizant of that going into this. I too have heard some of the same concerns that Julie have heard, that we don't have restrooms anywhere. So when folks go out to walk, I know that we're potty training, and anytime my son tells me that he needs to use the restroom, we either have to go the nature path, which I believe is illegal, or we have to turn around and go home. And so knowing that our community is changing and trying to meet people where they are, I'd love to see us take a step towards incorporating bathrooms. But I'm curious about the space where the 4 water towers are. And if that is potential, you see directly there's 4 water towers, and then there's a space there where there's 1, and then there's nothing below it. And I'm curious, just below.
This one?
Nope, that's where the Justice Center is, right
Here?
there. What's going to be there, and is it a possibility that we can put any amount of parking there, or what's being used in that area?
The fence runs right along there that
Okay.
secures the water tower area.
There's a building in there too for the pump
And a
station.
little space right in
Some
there.
booster pump stations in there as well.
Okay.
I don't think that's shown on there, is it?
It might just be grayed
It's just
out.
grayed
It's,
out, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, it's probably underneath that writing. There's a building there, I think it's about 600 square feet, that's got booster pumps in it.
Yeah, there is a chain link fence that comes around the outside of that site.
I don't know, personally, I would prefer to take the smaller kids' nature area out of that location and look at potentially somewhere else, or even if we want a secondary space.
I think that would actually be really easy, maybe, and again, we're not going to design it here in front of us,
Right,
because
of
Greg
course.
wouldn't like it if we did that.
Right.
But I think that's an easy piece of feedback, to take that and maybe even move it up to here.
I mean, yeah, like I think that would be great, because then you're kind of creating 2 spaces where you've got younger, smaller kids, and then, you know, bigger kids. And then if, you know, the consensus is that the skate park is great, then we've got 3 separate locations for different ages. And so I appreciate that. But I just want us to think more about, you know, this is ultimately going to be somewhat of a destination park.
I think the plans look really good. I think I share in the parking concern. I think what we'll find is a lot of Ward 3 residents are going to experience people parking there.
For me, I think it's a park that we should be planning for some level of parking. I understand it's a cost.
I probably would not be on board if it doesn't get a little bit of parking.
There are few parks where
People can walk a trail like or walk on paths like this that have different outlets. I think about Thornton's, Mary Carpenter, and some of the trails you can take around the park. And I think this is very similar to that. And we don't have that. And if you don't want to go to Webster Lake and walk around and, you know, dodge strollers, dodge bikes, then this is the park you're going to go to. And I think it eliminates a huge population that would be benefiting from the park without having parking.
even a small amount. So I probably wouldn't be on board if it doesn't get added in there. And then Ward 3.
And you're talking off 112th?
Somewhere.
Or, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
off Community Center Drive.
I
it's
wouldn't
important.
put it off Community Center Drive, but
That's too busy. The skate park?
I would be cautious to call it a skate
Okay.
spot.
Spot.
Greg, can you
Skate-
remind me?
Little spot.
So if there's a skateboard, anything right in this area, I would really like to see us reach out to the police department. We had a task force that Ward 3 had pulled together with some issues at our park. So if anything skateboard happens over there, I just would like to pull that group back together. There were a lot of residents. I mean, this room was almost packed that evening with people that had input around that. And I think there's valuable information they could probably share and weave in. We didn't do great planning when we put the park at EV Rains, so I just really want to consider that area there. And I agree in moving the little kids' playground over there. The detention pond, is it not possible to do something similar like by Webster Lake where there's framing around it? Is it a low sinking in? Am I?
Greg, can you talk about the detention pond a little bit more?
Sure. Could you repeat the last part of the question?
So at Webster Lake Promenade in the center, there's an area that is intended in the middle of the property for the detention pond, and it has like a fencing thing around it. It's built up higher. You might not be familiar with that spot to be able to answer it, but I'm just wondering if there's a way that that can be completely blocked off so it is a safe area.
Right. Or, yeah. I mean, that's definitely a possibility if it was considered to be a desired component to the park.
And then my last question is, there's no intent on getting the pedestrian crosswalk back in here again, is there?
We don't know. What I have asked is that when they're doing the school zone assessment on Global Village Academy, that they take into consideration the potential development of this space into a park and just keep that into consideration when they're coming up with options. The project itself isn't looking at the roadway, but since there's potentially some improvements that would happen there as part of the school zone, at least keeping that in mind. It may not mean a crosswalk goes back in there, but if it makes sense for it to, then it'd be under consideration through that project.
I think the mast arms that we put in up at the intersection will accommodate a crosswalk, so we can do that without having to change all the lighting and everything. I think we're prepared for that. I'll have to verify that with Nate, but I think that was already looked at.
The crosswalk up top, not up here.
Oh, are you talking about a crosswalk at the lower end?
Down by here.
Down
here.
Oh,
Sit
yeah.
down a crosswalk
Right,
there
yeah.
because of the problems.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not, we're not looking at putting it back in, but I did ask them to consider, just to take that into consideration, the development of the space and what does connectivity look like. And maybe that's down at Huron and up here at the signal.
Well, 2 stops on that street would probably help with loading and unloading at the school. But although it will probably drive people crazy if they have to stop twice when that's a thoroughfare that they like to use to get across. So it depends on what we want our citizens to have to deal with.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I would really like to echo the bathrooms thing as well. I know that sometimes when you go for runs or you're in this area, or if they're walking trails, I think just to have an option is best. In addition, parking is another. I think we're going to run into them, people trying to park across the road or trying to park in the neighborhoods or wherever else they're going to find it, because it could be somewhat of a destination, even though we don't intend it to be. Last component is I'd like to see something with art. You know, I think that we use art all over, and you've been really great with having that. And I think by having maybe different transitional art throughout the seasons or something, that component is.
It's actually there, we just didn't point it out to you. So a couple things. The most identified piece is right here, where the Arts and Humanities Foundation met and the DHM team met, completely separate from each other. They didn't even know one another existed. And both of them in the same process said, we want to see the butterfly at this new space. So the butterfly was the People's Choice last year, so it sits here in Rains in the triangle bed. It is the one that won, so it will be it's the one that was purchased. It's actually sitting in Rains still, which is unusual because of this project. Since we're not ready to move it, and it's such a large piece, we made a decision at first. It was like, well, do we move it to M&O and put it in a temporary installation, and what do we do with it? So we've left it right there until we figure out what's going on with this park space, and then the intention is it moves over. We've talked about maybe another art piece over here with the kind of police memorial area. It could be used by police officers, could be used by visitors to the Justice Center, people who are waiting for the court space. So a really easily accessible piece with some sort of sculpture. And there are a couple other little spots identified here and there as well.
Okay, I just love the art. Thank you.
So one thing I really do like about this whole plan is that it does include a lot of the native grasses. I feel like especially the views from the top of the hill are going to be amazing, especially the sunsets. And so I just think it's going to be really pretty with like all of the natural plants. And then and that's another reason why I do think we're going to get people who want to come here, you know, for a nice stroll in the evening, especially around sunset time, because it is going to be absolutely beautiful across the whole park. And I guess this kind of goes back to my earlier question, but I guess, can you just fill me in a little bit about what the police officers kind of said they wanted from this park?
Dina did that meeting, so I'll let her take that question.
They were really excited that there was a space that we were calling out for them. It's right next to their brand new building, and they loved the idea of being able to go out there. They specifically asked for the exercise equipment to be around that space, and then calling out a location for some sort of sculpture that they get to help select. I know that the chief has been he's talked to Michael Stricker about some sort of sculpture out there, so I can't speak directly to their conversation, but I know that they've talked about that. They did have concerns with the skate spot because of issues that they've seen out at our skate park at Rains. But they loved the looped trails, they loved the natural grasses and shade structure and having the art out there as well. So they're overall very excited.
Anybody else?
So if I could,
No, I'm just curious, as somebody newer to council who hasn't spent a whole lot of time in skate spots or skate parks, can you talk a little bit more about what some of the issues have been in at least in the established location in our city?
So I'd say a couple of things. One, a skate spot is a couple thousand square feet compared to the skate park, which is about 15,000 square feet, so really difference in size. You know, some of the challenges have existed are very real, where you've got a space where you've got a group of older kids who doesn't always follow the rules, where you got a group of young adults who doesn't always follow the rules, and have created some problems. And you've got some really great kids and great young adults that use that space as well and use it for what it's intended to be used for, and skate on that space instead of, say, Northglenn High School, which when we were building that skate park got voted unofficially as the best place to skate in the area. Where they didn't want kids skating on their stairs and on their railings, which are not skate rails, and using those spaces inappropriately. But we, especially during the, I think, first few years, but I think some of that has continued. Sometimes it's noise, sometimes it's not obeying the rules and figuring out how to make the lights turn on later than they should by breaking it. Sometimes it's been drug use, sometimes it's been loud or foul language. So when you pull a group of people together, sometimes they choose to follow the rules, some don't. Unfortunately, those that don't make a much bigger impact.
I'm wondering about a skate spot welcoming skaters, which I have one at home. He loves it, he obeys the rules. But it's also an environment that I don't always want him in because it's pretty negative. But if we have a smaller space, my wonder is if they're going to go, oh, this area is fun, and now so is this, and so are these park benches, and so are these walkways, and they're going to change the whole tone of the park because they didn't have a big enough space to play. They just had a little space to tinker.
I could see that carrying out. I could also see that the skate park we have is really well liked and has big elements that I think if you're looking for those big elements, they're there. This would be and I'm not necessarily advocating for or against it. I feel like I'm making a plea for it, but I'm not. But this would be really so flat work only, so
Right.
flat concrete with pieces mounted on top of it.
Right.
So small rails, small stairs, so the more advanced skater probably isn't going to be very drawn to it.
So my question would just be, is it necessary? I mean, if it's that small, is there a purpose to it? Because I was at Perry's trying to have a nice dinner, and bikes and skateboards were flying down the sidewalks. And the park's right across the street. Right. So the big, beautiful skate park and the elements that they like, they chose not to use. They went right through the restaurants over and over and over. So those kids aren't going to obey anyway. So is it necessary to have? Now, I also think it might be cute for the younger skater, because Logan started when he was 3 and his little thing, and he loved it, and it was super fun, but it was built for little kids.
Right. I think the goal behind it is to not leave out those tweens and teens that we often don't provide something great for in park spaces. When we talked to them, they're looking for spaces to hang out. They're looking for spaces to congregate in small groups. There's some playground equipment that's still interesting to them, but then you end up with the conflict between, and we've seen it here at Rains, where we have a parent of a 3 or 4-year-old who's going, "You're too old to be playing here. Go somewhere else." But when there's nowhere else for them to go, that's it. We make them grow up and don't necessarily have a good place to send them, or some place where they can go be kids that's age appropriate.
Amanda, were there other alternatives looked at for the skate park portion?
Actually, one of the 3 even had the skate spot on it.
And if you didn't do the skate park, what would we do? Anything or just? maybe
Probably
more
nothing.
grass or
But yeah, it'd be more landscaping.
Space, okay.
Go ahead. Well, talking about the skate spot, and I agree with your comment where we do need to cater to, our tweens and teens as well. I mean, we always need to keep them entertained as well. But I'm wondering if maybe, have you guys thought about the park off of Huron? That would be a good option as well. The park that's never used. The park of emptiness.
So parking is a major concern at that one.
Parking is a major concern there, but I mean, teenagers or tweens don't have cars.
That is
so,
true.
I mean, they're going to get there via skate park, but I mean, it really is a park that is never used. I mean, it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I love walking there because it's entirely empty all the time. But I mean, if we are looking for a skate park, that might be a really good location because it's right by Vantage Point, and then the other side of it is the businesses. There's not really a lot. I mean, the neighborhood back is the back, but that's really far back. I don't know. It's just an idea. If the skate spot doesn't work here, maybe we can move it down the street a little bit to the park that is never used.
I don't know, just to kind of comment on your comments, and I agree that that park is not usually used in any manner. However, the businesses were up in arms, and that is the reason why it's not used as much, because the parents and those people that could drive were parking in the business spots, and so therefore we had a lot of issues and a lot of contact with business owners and people that actually, have businesses in there. I mean, people were coming in, they were trying to go in and use their restrooms inside the businesses where they had no reason to be in there. They were parking, the business owners couldn't have their clients in there because the parents and those people were parking over there, and they were not respectful of other people's property. So the soccer organizations were asked they can't use it or very minimal.
Football was
I
using
mean, we had so many, it's a good idea, but that business is too close to have a lot of activity in that park.
Well, and then I think it kind of goes back to the point that we were talking about earlier. If you don't have restrooms and if you don't have parking, then we just have a huge open space that we spend how much money watering that gorgeous grass? It is gorgeous, but it's a lot. And how much money are we spending maintaining it for not to have any use? So it's just kind of heartbreaking in a way too.
I do think, I mean, Windburn is one of the few truly passive spaces we have, though, that it's in the middle of a suburban area, very built area, and you can get that quiet space to walk through and go hang out at the ponds and walk through either the soft surface trail on the south side or the hard surface trail that's throughout. So it's not a heavily used space, but it definitely provides that passive use that we don't provide at many other spaces in the community.
Jenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I'm curious about what happens next. You've heard all of these comments.
Yep.
You've heard some folks really like bathrooms and parking. Do you need consensus? What do you need to move forward?
So I have a list here that I was going to ask you about next. So a couple of things. We've heard a lot about plumbed restrooms or portalettes. Is there one or the other you would really like to see in the next version of this plan?
So for me, I think it's portalettes, just because of the issues that go along with a permanent facility, bathroom facility. You get a lot of vandalism in those areas too. I mean, we've had to lock the doors and put padlocks on them because we have homeless folks that go in there. They break all the plumbing and they do all kinds of stuff, and they actually break the locks to get in also. So I'm thinking portalettes are better than those type of things, just because of that. Also the expense. I mean, it's a real expense.
Okay.
I'm going to take a step back a little bit.
Okay.
Because I was letting everybody else weigh in. I kind of see the skate spot as an invitation to make the whole park a skate park, because it's all downhill. So no matter where you're at with a skateboard, say, oh, look at this, and they just ride the wave down. I'm in favor of just eliminating the skate park. And you talked about the age groups, when you get 4 or 5 or 6, maybe you need to move into something. The park that we improved on Larson, I think it is, it has the bicycle and the different kind of exercise equipment. That's more adolescent, teenage type playground. I would be in favor of having something like that rather than a skate spot.
And that's identified, I'm pointing at Dana's paper like you can see this. Let me go back to the mouse. So that's identified some of that.
Yeah, because I do see the skate spot as a problem. Once you put a skateboard in the park, and man, I've never been on a skateboard, and I don't think I'm going to in this lifetime. But if I had a skateboard and I was a skater, I would love to come down that hill. So the other comment I have about the bathrooms, I agree that probably there should be bathrooms, but if it's a neighborhood used park, it means that you live close by and your bathroom is just a block away.
So that's the theory staff were operating off of, but I've heard some varying feedback.
If the goal is to make it a neighborhood used park, then I would not favor bathrooms. If the goal is to make it a destination park, then I would favor bathrooms.
And I think that's up to all of you.
And of the concepts, I like C, but I would move the playground area from D to C. Okay, now you can pick it up.
All right. So are there any other thoughts, strong thoughts, one way or the other? Bathrooms, no bathrooms, portalettes, or permanent?
So to Joyce's point, it is rare if you really kind of think through all the parks. You're right, I never go to a park that has a bathroom unless it's an E.B. Rain style or like Wash Park or someplace huge. And so if this is a smaller space, so I think the expense is probably something we don't need to take on. So I would say no bathrooms.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind pricing it out to seeing what the bathrooms were. And again, I think we need to talk about how much money do we have for this space. But if I had to choose, I would choose parking over bathrooms. But
Me too.
because I think that's going to be the bigger issue here. But I would like to see the pricing for both.
Greg, can I put you totally on the spot?
Yeah, absolutely.
Small bathroom facility, minimum cost. Plumbed.
You're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
just for construction. Then you have operations, heating, so they don't freeze in the winter, all that stuff. Cleaning.
I was just, we're not gonna hold you to that number, please don't hold him to that number or me.
But like a portalet enclosure, like a thing, a structure you put over a porta potty, you're probably looking at around 20,000.
Thank you. So, any other strong feelings on restrooms?
I don't think it's any surprise that I have strong feelings about this restroom thing. I'm curious, over by Croak Reservoir at Hugh Danahy Park, I know we have some.
That's the enclosure, that's what he was talking about.
Okay,
It's
but
an
we do
enclosure
have
and then we
bathrooms there.
slide portalets in
Okay,
during the
so
season.
just to clarify, it's more than just DB Rains that has bathrooms, and it's
Plum-
more than just.
Plumbed restrooms.
Okay, so what parks then do have porta potties in the like enclosure areas? Because I know for a fact Hugh Danahy does.
So it depends on the time of, during the summer, we put them where we have things actively happening. So Danahy has a pavilion that's rented out, so that's part of the reason that there are portalets at that site. If we have a space where we have programmed practices or some sort of event or activity happening there, then we can add portalets even without a structure to any of our park spaces.
Okay.
I'm trying to think where they're at right now. They're in Scout Park because we use it for archery, so even as an undeveloped, completely undeveloped space, there's a portalet there. We have portalets at Northwest, and we would continue to have portalets there even with plumbed restrooms to enlarge the number. We add portalets at Rains to, again, allow for capacity. Parks with portalets. And then, like I said, we've added them in and out of other spaces depending on the schedule.
Okay, I think if we're talking about adding parking because it's going to be a destination park, I think there should be at least one portalet or something there. I understand that plumbing a restaurant or restroom in a park is going to be very expensive, and so I'm open to that option because it seems like it's what we're using across the city.
Okay.
Just a quick question, because we were talking about vandalism in restrooms. I'm just curious, because Scout Park, there are just two that are kind of just sitting there and on the trail. Do we have a lot of issues there? Because it doesn't seem
It's
like
the
it.
plumbed restrooms that we have vandalism with.
In an area where there's no structure, I'm just asking, in an area where there's no structure, have we had issues at Scout Park? Just
Nothing that stands out. Occasionally there's always like the one-off issues, but it's not somewhere we've had the consistent problem.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Of course.
So with the shade shelter, the one that looks like a butterfly,
Yes.
is that, because it says it's with picnic tables and seating, is that going to be like a pavilion that's going to be rented out?
I don't see this as any of these spaces as rental pavilions, but more drop-in spaces that the community can use on an as-available basis. So I'm hearing, I think I heard more for portalets than I heard for others. Is that okay? Parking, I think I heard more yeses than nos. Okay.
And I'm wondering about how many spaces would you consider? Because you really wanted to stay a neighborhood park, I think.
design
Okay, all right.
And then skate spot is the other one I'm looking to get your feel on. I think I'm hearing more no's, but I just wanted to confirm that.
I'm okay on a yes if we kind of cover our bases on some things.
Okay.
But I didn't think about the hill thing until you guys mentioned
there
that.
are some
You know, it's very
right.
similar to, I mean, I'm envisioning the one little stretch there on 112th at Thornton's Park. They had the little skate spot right there. I have never really been on it, but I'm kind of envisioning, I think it's like just a pad and they have little raised areas. Is that kind of what you're thinking, but even scaled down?
Smaller. That's a big skate park. It has lots of issues.
More of a street course versus a vert course. So I don't know if I got, can I just see like yeses? Just skate park, like yes, yes, no.
Say yes, or raise your hand.
I feel like I'm seeing lukewarm. If we cut it out, is anybody gonna be heartbroken?
No, I'm not heartbroken.
Okay.
I think we're going to find a space to skate no matter what, you know, is the problem.
But if we don't invite them
Right,
with
exactly.
some space, then they're not gonna focus on this part.
Right.
Okay, so I think we got good feedback for the concept plan. If everybody's kind of comfortable just with where that sits today, we've labeled it as the final concept, but there's still it's final as of just today. There's plenty of opportunity to change that, particularly as we go into the design process, which is where I would like to bring you next. And I'm going to come.
Before we go, what about the detention pond?
Oh,
I just want to bring up that the schools have a lot of detention ponds that are playgrounds. Also, they're usually not unsafe spaces unless they're in there during a rainstorm, but most people usually aren't. So like Prairie Hills, their entire playground is in a detention pond because that's the land that we had. So, I mean, detention ponds can be very programmable because they very rarely have water in them in Colorado. It's usually when you have like really big thunderstorms and stuff like that and a big wash, and then it slowly drains out and in 2 days it's dry.
so there's a detention pond right down here on 120th and Grant, or in the Grant building, and you can see it fills up when it really rains, and the rest of the time it's completely dry. All of that being said, this is one of those that as we go through the design process, we absolutely can bring you more refined drawings, and they will have engineering calculations with them, which will answer more of those questions about how much water do we think is going to be in there.
Yeah. If it was a retention pond and there was going to be water in it all the time, I would say then we'd really want to make sure that we were protecting it from people and doing those kind of things, but detention ponds typically are pretty safe.
So we don't want it to be wasted space though.
Right.
Because that example, just because it's by my house, that Fox Run thing is a mess.
Wasted space.
And it's just a ton of wasted space. So, I mean, because if that's a sizable area, maybe we can find a way to engineer it creatively.
Yeah. And there's lots of different ways to do it. Like the one at the promenade, my recollection of that is the reason that it's a box and it's built up is they wanted to build capacity while keeping on as small a footprint as possible. Mm-hmm. So then you get deeper detention, right? So with a space like this, it might be more gradual, might be more functional, and not hold much depth at all.
And then the only other thing was the crosswalk. Do we want to look at, we'll put that into the options as far as looking at a crosswalk for that south?
I think that we should consider that completely separate, just as if everybody's comfortable with that, just if it happens to make sense and taken into consideration with the school zone assessment, great, but not necessarily as part of this project unless there's...
No, that makes sense. I mean, it was a big issue back then, so that'll be a whole other discussion.
Okay.
Jenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions.
Yes.
One is we talked a lot when we were going through some of the initial zoning code about creating those like water garden spaces. Mm-hmm. Is that detention pond potentially somewhere that we could implement an element like that?
Yep, actually,
So
if you look up here, any of these little, see those red lines? Those indicate different kind of elevations, and again, very gradual elevations. And so we looked at these as potential little rain garden areas that would, the plant material could handle a little more moisture and be provide more of that native, but be able to have some planting areas as well.
Okay, cool. So we're looking more at going that direction instead of Fox Run Muddy Pit.
See this right here, like on this final as of today plan, that is the only bluegrass on the site. Everything else is native grass, which is much less watering, much less mowing. We also talked about doing interpretive signage so that we can educate people about why that grass is 8 to 12 inches tall. It's not because we forgot to mow it, it's because it's a native plant that's intended to be that tall.
Okay, and then second question, what's the timeline on this? So we're doing concept now, it's gonna go to development next. When are we looking at this park?
So that's a great question, and that's the next one I need from you. So you keep leading me right into the next question. So the two things the other two pieces I would like to get answered tonight are around budget and timeline. So as of right now, staff has identified funding in the 5-year CIP that we could budget for a project like this. We anticipate the development of a brand new park space to be about $4 million. It's a huge project. That being said, we think we can identify about $1 million in grant funding. We think we're comfortable with that. We think this is a great opportunity for GOCO and for Adams County open space dollars. It's never a guarantee. We think we can budget that somewhere between 2020 and 2023 using the half-cent sales tax, either the reserve or funds coming in, and we are prepared to propose that in the 2019 budget process, but wanted to get some feedback from you tonight so that you didn't just see that when you saw the budget in front of you and like, what's this extra $3 million? So if you're comfortable with that being somewhere in that 5-year plan, staff would propose we move forward with the design portion, which would take us, I believe we're in the 9 to 12 months for construction drawings. And then that plan would be ready to go when we're ready to move into construction sometime between 2020 and 2023. So looking for some feedback because it's a big number to throw at you at $3 million.
I was just going to say, what's the design cost? Just share with them what the
design cost is anticipated. We budgeted $300,000 total. We've spent about $33,000 on the concept phase and public outreach. We expect about $265,000 for design services.
Marcy?
Are there any other parks in the city that needed improvements that would not be addressed because we're shifting funds this direction?
I do not believe so. That part of the why we pushed it out to a minimum of 2020 was so we could identify Northwest Open Space first, since that's further along.
Yeah.
So is it that the school won't vacate the property until 2020 anyway? Like we wouldn't be able to do anything with the property until 2020?
Mid-year 2019
Okay.
is when they intend, could be, or late 2019. They did say they would vacate it earlier if we were to want to move forward with construction, but I don't think there's a reason to do that.
So during the development, we will be able to weigh in on what we like and do not like?
Absolutely. So we would continue to bring progress forward to you as we move through design. So if you're comfortable, I will bring forward an addendum for concept design here in the near future. Or not concept, construction design here in the near future. Okay?
That's great.
Mm-hmm. All right. That is all I needed from you tonight. Thank you.
It took a long time to get there. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks.
Okay, next we have Paula Jensen with the 2018 market study.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Paula Jensen, Director of Management Services. I am here to share with you the 2018 market study. This is informational. We don't have to make any decisions tonight. So for the newer council members, once a year, the city participates with the Colorado Municipal League and their salary survey. And most municipalities participate. And so what does participation look like? In January, February of each year, cities take their pay plans or their positions, and we log our data and match with positions in the CML database. We put in our salary, we do our benefits so that we can compare all of those. So in February, we do all this data entry. In May, then, we can pull out data that we want. And we cross our fingers and hope that the other cities put their data in also. We don't get to match all of our positions because not every position that we have in our pay plan is necessarily in the CML database, or are all these positions at other area municipalities. So we do this data entry, and then May, June, I pull information out. And I look at the following cities for comparison. I look at Brighton, Broomfield, Castle Rock, Commerce City, Inglewood, Lafayette, Parker, Thornton, Westminster, and Wheat Ridge. Those cities have been selected with council's assistance several years ago, but those cities are based on cities that we compete with for staff. So geographically, how close are they to us? How similar are they in budget size? And similar in employment size. So yes, Thornton is much, much bigger than us, but we compete with them for employees. Wheat Ridge is a little further from us, but it's similar in size, so we have like positions. So that's the methodology behind the selection of those cities. Not all of, as I was saying, not all of our positions can be surveyed because not every city has necessarily a probation officer or a community event supervisor. So when we have a position that we can't compare salaries to, we take that position and it falls under another position. So I'll use the event supervisor position as an example. These cities, these 10 cities that I talk about, we can't get good matches for. So then I come back to our positions and say, okay, we do survey recreation program supervisor. So that position has like responsibilities as the event supervisor, like educational and experience requirements, like supervisory or span of control requirements. So if the rec program supervisor salary is surveyed and it's below market or above market, we're going to put the community event supervisor position in that bucket and say, if that's below or above, our event supervisor is probably below or above. So if you look at the attachment A, which is the sheet with the colored columns, on the left-hand side of that sheet, that is our 2018 pay plan that you adopted as part of the budget process last December. And so it became effective December 23rd, which is the beginning of the first pay period of the year. So these are the positions we have, the grade, the steps, the minimum salary, the maximum salary. Those are the ranges. Then if you go to the next column that is titled Market Analysis, you'll see I've listed our survey cities. The first column is the 2017 analysis. And this is just to give you an idea of what happened the year before. So last year, during 2017, this is what the numbers looked like for the position. In the next column, in 2018, this is what the numbers look like for this year, May, June, when I pulled that data. A positive number means that the midpoint of our position is greater by that number than the midpoint of the salaries averaged together. So if you look at attachment B on that table, you can see the methodology. So I used accountant 2 as an example. These numbers aren't current, it's just an example. But what we do is we take the minimum of each range and the maximum of each range, get an average minimum, an average maximum, and figure out what that midpoint is of those averages, and compare our midpoint to that average midpoint. If the number is a negative in the 2018 analysis column, that means our midpoint is that percentage below the average midpoint of the survey cities. I'm going to stop right there because I just said a whole lot. Are there questions at that point, at this point? Okay. So anything highlighted in blue, if you take just a quick cursory look at every single page, those are the current positions that are below market, which is a lot, unfortunately, this year. This process is not scientific. There's absolutely no science to it. It is completely subjective. I take our salary ranges and put them in the database, and then an HR person at Wheat Ridge does it, and then a person in Thornton does it, and we're all comparing our job descriptions to each other's job descriptions in the best way we can. I'm using what I think is a good match, they're using what they think is a good match. So nothing is pure at all in the comparisons. The other thing is we can't control what each city's gonna do year over year. There are cities like Thornton and Broomfield who truly want to lead the market in salaries, which is wonderful for employees at Thornton and Broomfield. And then there's cities, and Westminster's another one. And then there's cities like us where we can't lead the market financially. We certainly don't lag the market, we don't, but we're not leading the market in regards to salary ranges at all. We're kind of in the middle. But we might have a position one year that is 2% below market, and we give it a 2% market adjustment, but Thornton might have moved that position 7%. And so we're playing this constant game of catch up. It's just impossible to catch up. So I think the best way to think about the market study is it's a gauge of where we're at. It tells a story of what other cities are doing. If there's, I can answer any question about any specific position. I don't think we need to go there, but we can see how there can be these huge outliers one year, and then one year there's no outliers, and I go right back to the data the year before and say, what happened? Well, a city might have reclassified the position or made it a higher level position and gave it a $15,000 raise. Well, the following year when we do the analysis, it is completely skewed. So that's why I say it's not a scientific methodology, but it's our best gauge of seeing where our salaries fall in the market. And are we missing the mark? And we could debate about that. If we're 4 below, does that mean we're missing the mark, or 7 below missing the mark? What's palatable? I don't know.
Do you
Yes.
like parallel data on our turnover rate by position?
I don't. That's an interesting concept, though, and I think if we had, high turnover in a specific position with a common pattern, we would need to start looking at that. Now, the chief isn't in the room tonight to defend himself, and so I think he would say, well, police officer, we have a high rate of turnover, there's a pattern here. I would argue a little bit, because when I look at the turnover year over year from police officers, it's higher than other positions absolutely in the city. But that turnover isn't by and large because those officers are going to another municipality that's paying more. Some of them are. Some of them aren't making it through the FTO program. Some of them are choosing to go into another career. We have 2 officers leaving next month who are both going to be firefighters. They're leaving. 6 months, 8 months ago, we had an officer leave to go be a pilot, lifelong dream. So I think you have to weigh all of those things. But I hear what you're saying, and I think it's a great idea. If we were seeing turnover like that in drastic numbers for one specific position, we would have to dive deeper and say, what are we doing? But we're just not seeing it. And turnover, anytime turnover gets to double digits, I start to get queasy because I don't want over double digits. 10 and below, I think, is a decent number. I just did the stats. I think we're at 5% year to date, maybe a little higher. But we're also in a great market right now. The flexibility for employees is great right now. So we're going to see a little more turnover.
To follow up, I apologize. Do we do any sort of exit interview or track? Like you mentioned, you have some anecdotal,
Sure.
Firefighters and pilots, but I'm looking citywide. Do we have happy employees? So because happiness sometimes can outweigh
Sure.
finances.
Sure. We do an exit interview for all full-time employees that terminate employment. We don't force it. We invite it. We send them a packet of information, and I would say 98% of them follow through with it. And part of that process is filling out an informational sheet that asks questions about why are you leaving? what can we do different? Is there something that made you leave? You know, things like that. What advice do you have for someone taking your position? And overall, we have happy employees. Now, we do have turnover, and employees do leave for more money. We typically see that at our shorter term employees who are younger in their career. And right now, money is more important as opposed to stability, longevity, benefits, a long-term retirement plan. So a lot of it has to do with where they're at in their career also. Our younger employees, I use that word loosely because we all want to be one of the younger employees. But I would say our late 20s, early 30s employees, they're a little more mobile than some of our more tenured employees. Overall, I think we have happy employees and great benefits. So, but we also all have bills to pay, right? And salaries are important.
Jenny, do you have a question?
I'm sorry. Building my question.
Okay,
Jenny?
thank you. I'm curious, when was the last time we did an employee satisfaction survey? I know we've got the exit interview piece, but when was the last time that we did that and collected the data anonymously?
We did specific to salaries.
I mean, just
I haven't.
Not
Okay.
specific to salary, specific to the work culture and
I would
what we
say
provide.
we're just an open enrollment before. So approximately 18 months ago, we did a survey out to our employees regarding benefits and what changes they'd like to see around benefits, if any, in regards to provider. Is it more important? Are less expensive office visits more important than your monthly premium, you know, so asking lots of questions like that. So we've done that around benefits about 18 months ago. And then about 12 months ago, we did a survey around wellness and what can we do in the culture around wellness to improve employee satisfaction.
But there hasn't been anything like totally in general around, you know, I feel like my supervisor's got my back. I like working here. The work hours are flexible. Like nothing sort of comprehensive to kind of gauge where people's satisfaction is.
No, not to that extent. In the fall, in November, December of every year, I meet with each employee group to tell them what their salary will increase by for the next year. So they each get a personalized individual sheet. Here's what's happening with your salary range, your individual salary for the following year and when that's going to happen. That's not a survey, but that is certainly an opportunity for me to get feedback, and I get it. And for the most part, the feedback's good and employees recognize where we're at in regards to salaries and what's possible and what makes sense financially for the city. But there's outliers. There's employees who, at last December's meeting, were not thrilled when I said merit increases are not happening for 2018. And, there were some rough meetings. And so employees are not shy about how they feel here at the city of Northglenn, which is great. And I think we've created a culture where employees feel like they have the freedom to express themselves. I'm not opposed to doing an employee satisfaction survey like that. I think timing's important. Before we finalize the budget and employees see what increases might look like for next year, and then just coming off of open enrollment where there were no increases, now's a great time to do it, right? But I want to be, you can't pick the best time where you're going to win either. So maybe it's an end of the year thing where they've now seen what happened with their benefits for the year, they're seeing what's happening for their salary for the following year, and where are you at?
Right.
It's absolutely something we can look at.
City council has 4 employees and that the staff in general is not essentially our staff, but I think if there are things that we as a council know that we want to start moving towards in terms of improving or working on, the work culture, then I think that's something I would love to know. But in terms of some of the market adjustments and merit increases, how is cost of living factored into
a staff salary.
So, cost of living adjustments is really a term of the past, and it's not done in public sector anymore. So a cost of living adjustment, or often referred to as a COLA, is an adjustment that is based on the cost of living, right? Gas prices, the cost of a gallon of milk, typical housing prices. And so COLA adjustments kind of faded away when this new idea of market adjustments came. So if you're going to do a cost of living adjustment, the position that you're in is completely irrelevant. If the cost of living has gone up and the organization wants to do cost of living, that means across the board, everybody gets the same thing. So if you do a 3% COLA, everyone gets 3% no matter what position they're in, no matter what the market says the position is valued at. So we don't do cost of living and haven't in my tenure here. And I'm not aware of any other municipality that is doing cost of living. It's kind of a thing of the past. And market replaced that. And market is, again, position specific. So, you know, I put our salary range in for human resources technician, and all the other cities do. And what are all these cities doing? And we compare it. It's the position specific, which is why you can see the numbers vary so much in that blue column and in last year's column. It's position specific.
And I appreciate that. I'm just stuck on the fact that I guess a couple of things. One is that the younger generation that you referred to is actually Jordan, Julie, and I, and we think about having, you know, student loans that we have to pay, and we think of the fact that, you know, based on minimum wage right now, none of us could probably afford to rent a one-bedroom apartment in Northglenn. And so I just want to make sure that we're being cognizant of trying to help ensure that our employees are able to afford to live in the community where they work. And so I don't know how we get to that place where we're actually acknowledging the fact that Adams County is one of the most expensive counties in the country to live in, and we can't minimize that.
Right. No, I don't think we should minimize it at all. And I agree with you. You know, I have a child who can't move out. I get it, right? Because unless she's going to live with 5 people.
Right.
So I completely understand that. But at the same time, we have to have a structure or a system in place or a process or methodology that's defensible as we give raises. You know, that makes sense. And so right now, this is our best methodology. Now, we can depart from the market study and just say we're going to give cost of living adjustments, but I don't think that's going to change turnover or make people stay longer. Because what's going to happen is we're going to stop, my prediction is of what's going to happen is we're going to stop those market adjustments and say, okay, everyone gets a 3% COLA or a 2% COLA, whatever that is. But our area cities that we're competing with for line staff, police officers, HR folks, parks workers, they're continuing to do a different methodology and value the position based on what the market says, and their salaries are going to continue to grow. We're still going to lose the people who are looking for more money. The other thing that we all have to embrace, which is hard for me to embrace, is the world is changing. And right now, for the first time ever, we have 5 generations in the workplace. We still have traditionalists working in the workplace, and then we've got our X's and our Y's, or millennials, in the workplace, and their outlook and what they want and need from a workplace is so different. It's just so different. I mean, traditionalists were entering the workforce with a pension in mind. And that's not what we're seeing from our millennial employees. We're seeing here and now, here and now. And their quality of life expectations are just so different. Work flexibility, work from home, you know, split shift, work in the morning, go play, come back, you know, all those types of things. So I think it's a real balancing act. I think it's a real balancing act. I think as subjective as this process is, I think it's a good process. I think it gives us a good gauge, and I think as a city council, then we just make a recommendation and hope that we make a really good decision in regards to salary adjustments, which will come with the budget process here in a few weeks. And then we keep working on things like offering great benefits. I mean, this year, through, I think, a lot of our work with our wellness program and just being really proactive with information to our employees, we had a great year in regards to claims. And employees saw no increase in their health insurance or their dental, and not one thing changed in the plan. I mean, that's amazing. For an employee-only coverage, it's $60 a month. And a doctor's visit is $25 a month, or $25 a visit. And I know the folks sitting in here who work on their own are really jealous about that.
I'm really jealous about that.
I know it. I mean, it's just a Cadillac benefit plan. It absolutely is. So I think hand in hand with our salaries, we just have to continue to really work hard at offering great benefits and continuing to go out to our employee group and say, what other benefits do you want? We have a benefits committee that we pull together once a year during the renewal process. And we brought that group together this year knowing we didn't have an increase, but we brought them together anyways and said, what are we missing the mark on? Is there a benefit out there that we should be offering that we're not offering? We're looking at starting AFLAC next month, which is additional critical injury insurance type stuff. It's not funded by the employer, but you're getting a group rate as an employee if you want to purchase into it. Prior to the city manager leaving, the HR staff did some research on different benefits like providing employees 2 hours a quarter paid to go volunteer somewhere, to be good stewards in the community. So we're asking employees, what do you want? What makes it a better workplace? Now, that little project's on hold a little bit until we get some stability in the city manager's office. Not that you're not stable.
I understand.
You're not, Rob, you're great.
My feelings are hurt.
But, you know, just so, because those are impactful decisions. But we're certainly asking the questions, and we sent that benefits committee out there. We've brought them back twice. You know, what do you want? What can we do to be more of a workplace that you want to come to every single day?
I've got one last question, and you may not, this may be something I can find in the employee manual, but what do we offer in terms of paid maternity leave, and do we offer paid paternity leave?
We comply with the Family Medical Leave Act. So employees who need to be out for an extended period for their own illness, childbirth, or to care for a loved one, if they have met the requirements of FMLA, which is 1 year of service or 1250, a certain number of hours worked, they qualify for 12 weeks of FMLA. FMLA is not paid leave, but FMLA provides job protection. So while you're out on leave, your position is protected so that you can take care of your needs. That's 12 weeks. In addition to complying with the Family Medical Leave Act, the city does provide for short-term disability. You are eligible for short-term disability after 1 year of employment, and once you've reached that 1 year of employment, if you need to be out of work for your own medical need, so it can't be for a family member, but for your own medical need, you will receive 80% of your salary paid and continuation of your benefits after you use 80 hours or 2 weeks of general leave. At the beginning of 10 years of service, that 80% moves to 100%, and you're paid 100% of your salary while on leave after you've exhausted 2 weeks of general leave, which is very generous in comparison to many, many organizations. It's a great benefit. And then we do for extended illness, and I'm not saying maternity is extended illness, but we do also have long-term disability. So if an employee can't come back from short-term, they can go on to long-term and receive 60% of their salary.
Paul, just a follow-up. You knew I was going to ask this question.
I don't know if I know, but let me
No, I
hear it
ask
and
it
I'll
every
say
year.
yeah.
So you kind of mentioned that you realize that the workforce is changing and that we have to kind of figure out how we're going to accommodate that. And I know it's tough when we're in an industry and a business in which 8 to 5 is the norm, but what are we going to do to kind of make it appealing to want to work for a municipality when 8 to 5 is the norm? How do we change it so that we're making it an appealing place, and workspace is part of it in the setting? Some of it is a little bit more on that flexibility, but I kind of ask this every year, just, you know,
Yeah.
what are we going to do about that?
We're going to brainstorm and come up with some really great ideas, but you're right. You know, municipal government provides a service to the community between the hours of 8 and 5. And so for many of the positions, they need to work 8 to 5. I think about the front desk where utility billing happens. They open at like 5 to 8, I think, and they close at 5 after 5. That needs to be manned. So I think what we need to do in those situations is kind of get a shift in mentality from that supervisory staff, and how can we make this more flexible? How can we meet the needs of the 2 staff members that man that desk? Do we have an employee who has small children and needs the morning to do that routine, and then can this other employee fill in? And I think we already do a great job of that for the most part. With administrative coverage. In other areas of the city, I'll use 2 of my employees, Stephen and Ashley, who do the events. They like to work 11 to 7 and 10 to 6. Okay, doesn't impact services at all. Except, you know, on event day, they work 1 million hours, so they're here the whole time. But day to day, why not let them work that 11 to 8 or 11 to 6 or whatever it needs to be. So I think individually departments and supervisors recognize those needs and are making those shifts and those adjustments. Sanitation truck needs to run from 6 to 2:30 every day, so it's harder to do that. I think with the way that we have staffing and the well-oiled machines that we run here at the city, and with the great general leave that we offer employees, most employees are getting their time off and needs met. I know at orientation, often we each do a section in HR, we each do a piece of orientation, and often my last word is family, work-life balance, culture, all important. If you don't feel like your needs are getting met, come see us and let's figure it out. And nobody's knocking down my door. So I think we do, in general, a great job. But I don't have a magic answer, you're right. Because we don't, 8 to 5 is good. Do we want to run City Hall from 8 to 8? No. That creates different costs, right? Electricity and water. Yeah.
It is just, it's crossing this realization that it is an 8 to 5, so it's kind of tough to do accommodating things with everybody's schedule, and I get that. But it's also some of the things that, as we're kind of re-looking at this space here, it's also how our office space is set up. And is it, we're in a city hall that has very few windows.
Right. And there is a committee working on space assessment. I don't sit on that committee, but they're working on those types of things and making, just with some of the initial stuff that the committee has shared with the leadership team, they're making suggestions that are creating more open spaces, more welcoming spaces, spaces where it's not just a door, but there's a window too, so you can see through the office, and adding some or shifting some walls so we can get some more windows. So, have you sat on that committee, Rob, at all?
No, I've just been involved with it.
So I know the city clerk sits on that, and they've shared some information with us, and they're great plans and great concepts, and hopefully we can change the upstairs to a more contemporary environment, if you will. Yeah.
The terminology, whether it's cost of living allowance or market analysis or whatever you want to call it, my main concern is that our employees are making a livable wage, and I'm not sure that the meter reader in Northglenn makes what the meter reader in Thornton makes, and you know,
The meter
that's a
reader-
job that he could shift over, because what's important at the end of the day is how much am I taking home to feed my family?
I agree with you. And the meter reader here at Northglenn probably isn't making what the meter reader in Thornton is making.
That was just an example.
Right.
But we can't afford to pay our meter reader here what they're making in Thornton, which is why we take a combination of cities and get an average and get a midpoint and compare it. Now, are our employees making a livable wage? I can't answer that. That's a loaded question, and a livable wage is different for everybody, right? Based on circumstances. So I want every single employee to make a livable wage, without a doubt. I'd like every single one of these blue squares to be a 0, and I'd love it if we could do it in this budget. But I'm told we can't. And you know, to do that means we give up all of these other things. And so it's really a balancing act of what needs to be done in the city, what maintenance, what infrastructure, what, you know, all of those things need to be accomplished. At the same time, what can we do for our employees? And let's not forget, we still have to pay for those benefits too. They didn't go up, but we still have that high cost too. So it's really this balancing act. But you're right, Mayor Pro Tem, we're not paying our meter reader what they're making in Thornton. We're just not. I can tell you what the range is in Thornton, and then I can tell you what the range is in Westminster, and then you can see our range. And the other thing to keep in mind is our ranges, the minimum is step 1, the maximum is step 30. So our ranges are 1 to 30, and each number is a percentage. So when you move to step 2, you go up 1%. When you move to step 3, it's 1% plus 1%. So that's how our pay plan is set up, with 30% range. Thornton might have a 22% range, or a whole different methodology where they don't do it in percents and they do it in half percents, 1.5 or 1.34. So again, that's what makes it so non-scientific. Is it's just not apples to apples. It's apples and plums and oranges and bananas, because we're looking at 10 different cities. So it's yeah.
Yeah. Jenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Hopefully last question. On some of the ones where there's a greater gap in the above or below market value, I'm seeing that there are quite a few that are at least 10 percentage points or above. Is there any sort of plan to move those folks closer to the rest of the employees in terms of that gap this year? And then secondly, what should we anticipate seeing or thinking about when you guys come forward with the budget?
So, yes, there is a plan. And so we're looking at a tiered approach to market adjustments this year. So last year, if you go back to the memo, as a reminder, I put on here what we did last year. So last year, market adjustments were capped at 2%. So if your position was 5% behind last year, your position moved only 2% because it was capped, even though you were 5% behind. So we left a 3% gap on the table. If your position was only 2% behind, well, hooray for you, you got moved up all the way, right? And then for merit increases, general employees didn't receive anything, or are not receiving anything this year, and police officers are receiving their steps. So this year, what can you expect? And I don't think it's changed, so correct me if I'm wrong, Rob. But in regards to market adjustments, we're looking at a tiered approach. So if your position is between 1% and 5% behind, 1 and 5? 1 and 5% behind, you're going to see a 2% adjustment. If your position is between 6 and 10% behind, you're going to see a 4% adjustment. If your position is greater than 10 behind, you're going to see a 6% adjustment. So we're not going to close the gaps. We just can't. But we're going to close them as much as we can. And the positions that are greater behind, you're going to get a bigger chunk to close it as much as we can financially. So that's what you'll see in the budget presentations when that recommendation is made around market adjustments. And then regarding merit increases, which is the increase an employee receives on their anniversary date, and that increase moves them through the range. So a market increase moves the range. The merit is what moves you within the range. And the proposed merit increase that you'll see with the budget presentation is no. It's 2 or 3. I think it's 3%.
I know you guys met when I was
I was gone that one time, so I don't know if it changed.
I don't think it's 4.
Okay.
So it's either 2 or 3% for the merit. We're going to be on the same page by the time of that presentation. I'm sure.
We definitely will before we bring it forward.
I'm sure we'll be on the same page. But that's what you can anticipate coming with the budget, is both increases this year. So, and then the police officer steps, sorry.
Can you remind me, a couple years ago when we had the big differences, did we do a tier then, or did we got in a little spot with that?
We've done tiered before one time during my tenure, and I believe it was while Mr. Pick was here. So it was that long ago. During the first year of Mr. Hayes' tenure, I think we did something big. We did.
Yeah.
We did. I think we brought everyone to midpoint. I think it was that big. And so
So not as a tier, we just took them.
I believe we just took them, and that would have been in 2016. And I didn't bring that data with me. But we did a big adjustment. Which is interesting when you think about it. 2016, we did these huge adjustments. And then 2017 happened, and look, we still have all these negative numbers. So we're just chasing it. We just can never get to that finish line, right?
All right.
And
Anybody
endless
else?
money would get us there.
Anybody else? Thank you, Paula.
All right, thank you.
And we're adjourned unless you have some business.
I don't think so. Just some individual stuff.
Might be immaculate heart of Mary.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna call Jenny.